one of the things that may be keeping us from actually finding love, blind spots in dating. What exactly are blind spots? Thank you so much for joining us again on Second Act TV. I'm welcoming back Sandy Weiner, the dating coach, relationship expert, and author of Choice Points in Dating. Sandy, as always, thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me back.
We have a couple of good topics to talk about today. You brought to my attention the whole concept of blind spots in dating, that one of the things that may be keeping us from actually finding love or proceeding down a relationship path is certain blind spots. Other people see us differently than we see ourselves, and we don't even realize we're doing that. Talk to me about that. What exactly are blind spots?
Yeah, just like you said, they are the things that we don't see, but that can sabotage relationships. So just like when you're driving and you have a blind spot in driving, if you don't see where you're going, you will hit a car, and that's really bad. And so when we can shine a light on these blind spots, we can actually fix them. We can have more success in our dating lives.
Just so people know what we're talking about, what is a good example of a blind spot?
So some common blind spots are oversharing on a first date, for example.
Okay.
And a lot of people do that. They think that's vulnerable. If you watch any of the reality shows, the dating shows, people just spill out their entire life and they're thinking, oh, we're really connecting. But what they're doing is they're sharing their wounds, they're sharing the hard stuff, and they're actually sharing so much with a person they don't even know that they're crossing a boundary, and the other person is left carrying this heavy weight. Do I need to take care of this person, or do I want to date this person? So that's a very common blind spot.
Yeah. And I guess it's blind spots refer to also patterns of behavior, that this is something that goes, repeats itself, that you're doing this, you don't even understand that you're doing it. What causes that? How do we get our blind spots?
Yeah, well, most things that we have in our relationships start with our family of origin. We observe relationships with our parents that weren't healthy, but we don't really understand what they are. So we think that's normal, so-called normal. So let's say we had a family that overshared, there were no secrets, or the opposite, where everything was a secret. So we don't open up at all to people, and we think that's what people do. We're also influenced by our romantic relationships. So if we are dating people and we start to see there are patterns in who we date and how we date, that person, it started out, that person was love bombing you, and then there was a person pulling away and the communication was terrible, or I didn't speak up early on. So these are things that we don't always see.
Yeah, and ultimately you sabotage yourself that way. Well, you mentioned oversharing as a common blind spot. I see here you said we bring our representative to dating. What does that mean?
So I don't remember who coined this term, but your representative is basically this person who you think will be acceptable on dates. So this part of us, this representative, and I know many celebrities have referenced this, and many of us do this. I mean, I think we all want to be accepted and liked, but we bring this fake person to dating. Even in our profiles, if you're dating online and you're representing yourself as somebody who's perfect and weighs 20 pounds less and has a different hair color, like these are all kind of what we wish we would be. But when we start to get comfortable with who we really are, then we can really show up very differently. And, we always meet people where we are. So the person who's bringing the fake person is meeting people who may be a little fake.
I think women in particular, well, and I'll ask you, are, fall prey to this because we've been, especially women our age, because we were raised to be pleasing, be what the man wants. And I think the bringing a representative goes far further along than just on the dating side, on dates as the relationship develops. And then suddenly, you're, who am I? And when we're the ones that created it, I can identify with that to a certain extent. Absolutely.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
until we really become confident in our own authenticity and own all of who we are, and we're not afraid to show the parts that we may have been ashamed about in the past, that's when we have much more success
Mm-hmm.
with our dating lives.
Right. Yeah. And so that's the blind spot, not realizing that that's, what you're doing. The
Mhm.
next one here, we compare everyone to someone we used to love. That's a tough one.
Yeah, so that could be, first of all, if you had unfinished business, let's say you still love somebody, there might be somebody who's widowed who
Mm-hmm.
is still really thinking about the spouse that they lost, and they compare everyone, nobody measures up, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's one blind spot where you don't realize you're not really seeing the person in front of you. So whether
Mm-hmm.
you're comparing somebody in a positive way, like the person you loved, or the person you couldn't stand and who broke up with you, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe the person who cheated on you. So you used
Mm-hmm.
to love them, but they cheated on you. And so now you're comparing everybody to the person who cheated on you, and it's not fair. Or you dated a
Mm-hmm.
lawyer and now you'd never want to date a lawyer again because the next lawyer is going to do the same thing that the other lawyer did. And we
Yeah.
make all these conclusions, but they're blind spots because it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't let us see who's in front of us.
And that does go back to what we said at the beginning, that other people see us differently than we see ourselves. Because while you were explaining that, I was thinking of somebody in particular. I was like, well, can she see what she's doing? But no, she can't. And
No.
that's something she's going to have to discover herself rather than having me or somebody else tell them.
Yeah. I mean, let's say you have a lot of anxiety and then you start
Mm-hmm.
to build up stories. I was speaking to a client the other day who was the guy she's been dating has been a little less communicative. He couldn't make a date that week because he was really busy. And he told her, he was very clear, I'm really busy. I want to see you next week when my
Mm.
work is done. Made a date, put it on the calendar in advance. He's been texting her, and her anxiety started to build. Maybe he's not
Mm.
going to like me anymore.
Mm.
And so I said to her, let's separate fact from fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the facts. He texted you. He told you he wants to see you. He's sorry he can't see you this week. Those are all facts. What's the story? Oh, he's
Yeah.
probably pulling away. Maybe he met somebody else, but
Yeah.
this is what
Yeah.
we do. If
Yep.
you're an overthinker and you have
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, and so that's a blind
Mm-hmm.
spot. You could end
Mm-hmm.
up being so anxious that you push the person away.
I know, I agree. And again, women, I think, are more prone to that. Although it's funny, I just got a comment from a man. I won't say who it is, but that kind of fell in that category as well. Should I worry about this? So yeah, worry. And of course, worrying doesn't help anything. Speaking about that, we don't trust easily is another blind spot.
Yeah. So when you've been betrayed in some way in the past, you're not even always conscious that you're looking for ways to find the person is betraying you. I mean, you are looking for
Mm-hmm.
ways not to trust, whether a person cheated on you or you found something in their possession that really upset you or something. You are looking for ways to find those things. And I have a
Mm-hmm.
client who is doing this right now.
Yeah.
She had been cheated on in the past, and
Mm-hmm.
she is looking for ways that this guy is going to do the same thing to her, and she's trying to protect herself. And I keep saying to her, you are going to end up sabotaging this relationship if you continue having
Yeah.
these obsessive thoughts.
Yep.
And then by the time you do see him, you're so angry at him. And he's like, well, what did I do?
What did I do? Yeah. You just had a whole other event with him or conversation that he wasn't part of.
Exactly.
I can totally, unfortunately, I can identify with that too, with that reference of trust and cheating. And it's something I've said this before, I had to really, really work on. And yeah, what is the story? What is actually happening? And as you said just a minute ago, disassociate that with, from whatever you experience that is, giving you that blind spot.
Yeah.
Finally, here you say we are not vulnerable enough. In
Right.
what
So the
ref?
first point I spoke about oversharing, and that
Mm-hmm.
people think is vulnerability, but it's not. It's
Right.
actually a boundary crossing.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not vulnerable enough, it means that you're so afraid of being hurt that you have a
Mm-hmm.
big wall up. And
Mm.
there's a difference between having a wall up that's like a partial wall. It's not a full wall. It's sort of, I'm trying to get to know this person. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
open my heart completely and just jump into this relationship in 5 minutes. That's healthy. But you do want to be vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
enough to make a connection that's saying, these are my fears, or this
Mm-hmm.
is I'm really attracted to you, I really do want to meet up with you, I'm wondering, I miss you, those are vulnerable statements that a lot of people are afraid to say.
Mm-hmm.
So saying, I really would love to see you before you go away, where the guy
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know or the woman doesn't know, we can't read each other's minds. And so
Mm-hmm.
just hearing like I miss you is vulnerable. It's hard to
Yeah.
say because what if the other person doesn't miss me back?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not saying these things, if you're not
Mm-hmm.
ending a date with, I would love to see you again, and I really mean it,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm not just saying it to be nice,
Yeah.
then the person's going to know, okay, maybe I didn't get a good read on you, but now I
Mm-hmm.
know. And so we
Yeah.
need to be able to take that wall down slowly, open up a little bit each time, tell a little bit about our personal lives and not just the representative that we're
Yeah.
all perfect, everything's great, oh,
Interesting.
it's wonderful.
Interesting. Again, in listening to you talk about this, it just kind of strikes me that this is probably a lot worse for people our age than I think younger people. I mean, all the history we have that we bring to the table that builds anxiety. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that just understanding that you're in a position to perhaps go down that road is a realization in and of itself. Would you agree with that?
I think in many ways, yes, when we have more history, and
Mm-hmm.
especially if we haven't worked through the stuff, then
Yeah.
it can definitely build up. But I've seen this in younger people too, even people in their late 20s who I know who bring a lot of this anxiety and distrust because it's been a relationship pattern, or
Mm-hmm.
they've grown up with parents where there's a lot of dysregulation and they're
Mm-hmm.
just not sure how to be
Yeah.
in relationship.
How do we identify our blind spots? Is there something that we can do? I know I think there's quizzes online, all that sort of thing. But how can we identify to see if we have a blind spot?
So I have three basic things that we could
Mm-hmm.
do. One is to really do a debrief of your relationships and ask yourself 5 questions. Why did these relationships end?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any patterns emerging from the relationships? Do you pick partners that are similar over and over again?
Mm.
Do you struggle maybe with speaking up and setting boundaries in the relationship? And you really look at what your piece was.
Yeah.
And did you choose partners who were distant and try to bring them closer?
Mm.
We often pick partners who are similar to the hardest parental relationship that we have and try to fix them. And one of my clients was telling me about a partner she had who was very judgmental, but in a very different way from her mother. I kind of pointed out, oh, he reminds me of your mother. And she said, yeah, but my mother was different. I'm like, yeah, but very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are continuing to choose partners who are judgy
Mm-hmm.
and then not being happy because they're condescending and they're controlling and they're judgmental, really look at these patterns, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to help you start to uncover, oh, these are the things I couldn't see before. Because we may dismiss them, especially if we haven't had a healthy childhood or a healthy relationship background. We don't know what normal looks like. We don't know what
Mm-hmm.
healthy looks like. Sometimes just writing it down, you can start to see things popping out.
Yeah. And then you said here, ask for feedback from those who love you. And that could be tough sometimes. That could be tough sometimes, not just for you, but also for them.
Yeah, so not everybody is going to give you honest feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, you've cultivated some friends who will be honest with you and will be able to point out the things you're missing. I mean, I've given feedback to family members that weren't open to hearing it because
Mm-hmm.
it was unsolicited, right? But if I was asking, what do you see
Yeah.
in me that I'm missing here? And
Mm-hmm.
I really want to know, it takes a lot. You got to put your ego aside and just say, okay, I want to learn. And not all the feedback is going to be good feedback. You have to be able
Mm-hmm.
to discern between what's feedback that will really help you and what's
Mm-hmm.
not. But take it in, listen to it all, and
Yeah.
look for patterns because
Mm-hmm.
they will show up. Your friends have seen you dating people who didn't respect you, maybe. They're going to tell you that. I
Yeah.
think you really deserve better, and you keep
Mm-hmm.
dating people, and you're paying for all your dates, everything. You're lending money to men and they're never paying you back. Like, what's wrong with you? It's that kind of thing. I think people will be
Mm-hmm.
honest with you if they're really good friends,
Mm-hmm. Well,
family
and that would be
members.
a huge breakthrough if you can identify something like that and stop it and stop sabotaging. And of course, working with somebody, a professional like a coach or a therapist is always a good choice. And of course, I'll link to all of Sandy's information, lastfirstdate.com. We have quite a few people working with you now that I hear, great things from. So that's terrific. Sandy, is there anything else you want to add here before we shut down the segment?
Don't be ashamed of your blind spots. I think
Mm-hmm.
many of us have so much shame over our past and the mistakes we made. I was speaking to a guy recently that I met online, and he said, I wasted 2 years dating people and missing red flags. I don't think it's a waste. We
Mm-hmm.
miss the red flags because we don't know any better. And
Right.
the fact is, if you're learning and you're now able to identify those red flags, your
Mm-hmm.
blind spots have been revealed. You
Mm-hmm.
you really have overcome. So don't regret, don't feel shame that we all
Mm-hmm.
go through this. I definitely have had many of these blind spots,
Oh yeah.
and hopefully we live and we learn, right?
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
yeah, get help for them though, because they are hard to see on our own.
It is. I agree. I agree. Thank you, Sandy. And pick up a copy of Sandy's book right there. A lot of what we talked about, there's exercises in here that can help you as well. Sandy, thank you. We'll see you next time on Second Act TV.